How you doing?
Good, I think. Who knows? I was too panicking with my microphone at that point in time to go. I hadn't unheard. Mikuna is how you pronounce our name.
Okay, and I'm panicking because at this very second, someone's walking in. My dog is about to go crazy, so it's perfect if that happens.
Well, as soon as
It's
your
so nice.
dog starts barking, I'll start mouthing. It'll look like me. It'll be very funny.
Please do that. A couple of housekeeping items. One, we had my first call with you was this morning. It was probably what, 10 minutes?
Yeah, and I was putting a car seat in while you were talking to me.
And it was one of the best first impressions that I've had in a long time. So I just want to say thank you for being you off the bat. Two, wanted to make sure you have coffee or something for this conversation.
I have Mikuna, of course, being a.
Perfect. Of course. We're going to get to that. And then lastly, who is the man that used to interview people and start by asking, what's your favorite swear word? You know who
I
I'm talking
can't
about?
fucking remember. I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. So is that the one?
I have no idea. I can't remember.
Oh,
Bernard Pivot. There you go.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I thought we would start off by telling the audience that we both want to know exactly who's in the audience. So if you want to put your role or your name or like what you want to get out of it, this is the most casual, hopefully, session that you'll hear today. But
And
let's
hopefully the most entertaining, maybe, but also informative. Entertainment, as one of my creative directors used to call it. So it's kind of like educational and entertaining, therefore respecting the viewer's time.
Well, and we're going to get to empathy because that was a big topic of conversation earlier. So I was doing my research on you, and one of the things that really stood out was that you're in love, uh,
Allegedly.
happily married. So I highly recommend his Twitter feed. And also, there was a recent press release. Let me see my notes here that identified you as an industry vet. You've won a million awards in my mind, from Cannes to the Clio's, the One Show, London Advertising Awards, etc. And it's an honor and a privilege to talk to you.
Thank you,
Um,
Stacy. You should be my hype person all the time. I like it. Maybe we'll just do
well,
every meeting like this.
I need one of me too. One other thing that stood out to me is that you took a career break, I saw, and I thought that was so cool to have that on your LinkedIn profile, because I think we all in advertising and media and technology work our tail off. So what led you to do that, and did you get the most out of it? I think you're on mute.
Stacy and I both have young kids, so having spent the last 12 years in one of the publicist agencies and the previous 10 years in WPP and IPG agencies, I just wanted to spend some time reconnecting with my kids, or trying to actually be a better dad and atoning for my sins of absences. Obviously, working from home has allowed our children to realize that daddy and mummy can always be bothered, but there's like real time. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to cook, ride bikes, go to the farmers market, stuff like that. I think I managed to do everything once and pretty much nothing in between, because I've still been advising Mikuna and some other startups in the background as well. So it never really stopped. It was more of a good PR, good social media.
I don't believe that. I think it was both.
It's probably
Um,
both.
but speaking of Mikuna, I said that right, right?
Yes,
Mikuna.
absolutely.
Tell us about the brand. I'm excited to hear it from you.
So Mikuna has been around for like 3 or 4 years. It started off, we have a great founder story. Ricky was a professional. He grew up, he's a fifth generation Ecuadorian. Um, his family is a five generations of farmers. They come from Ecuador. He grew up in that family. He became a professional tennis player, so he was on the ATP tour. And what happened is he contracted a pretty nasty disease that basically kind of like laid him low for like 2 years. And this, we have all of this on the website. My CEO is way better at telling the story. This is probably the first time I've actually tried to tell this story in public, so it's always good. I've basically been in my role for 5 years, for 5 weeks, but I've been part of Mikuna for on an advisory basis for the last year, helping redefine the brand, putting a new brand vision, trying to take all the great narrative that we have, the great story, and then kind of like visualize that and kind of move it forward as we kind of like as we accelerate. So Ricky basically tried a lot of Western techniques. He was living in America at that point in time. Tried a lot of different ways, like Western kind of medicine. Lots of doctors. They basically didn't know what was wrong with him. So he goes home, and one of the family friends basically says to him, "Hey, you should try some more of like kind of like more of the indigenous food." So he basically ended up being given what's called chocho, and it's actually part of the lupin family. And the lupin family is not a bean, because this is what we're always up against. It's a small plant that grows in what we call the chocho zone, or what Ricky calls the chocho zone, which is between 11 and 14,000 feet of elevation in the Andes Mountains. So it's a small lupin, and when it grows there, when it's actually harvested and it's still wet, it is 54 grams per 100 grams of plant protein. So it's one of the world's most incredible plant proteins that no one knows about. And because it grows at such a high elevation, and it's also a cover crop, and it actually is harvested in the winter, so there's no pesticides, it's one of the cleanest plant proteins you've ever heard of. And if I didn't have,
in the Andes?
and it only grows in the, well, there's lupins grow everywhere. They actually grow in the Santa Monica Mountains near me. I'm based in Los Angeles, so I see them all the time. They tend to be really beautiful purple little flowers, but the yields that we get in America, and one of our operations guys was actually posting some photos. He was walking with his little daughter recently, and they saw like a field of lupins, and he actually showed like how small the lupins, the seed pods are when they're grown in America at altitude, but when they actually are grown in the Andes, they actually produce a real yield that's really large. And then through a proprietary process, we actually debitter them, we mill them, we grind it into a powder, and then that powder becomes like our protein powder. And then that protein powder is also a flour substitute, so it can actually be used in multiple things. So it's kind of like it's a natural superfood. It has 9 out of 9 amino acids. It's 100% lectin free. It is 0 net carbs in the pure version. It is literally an athlete's dream. So you asked me a small question, and I just went off on everything. I have all the rest of the RTBs memorized. I have the tattoo. We could go into many different things.
RTB, I hear RTB, and I think real-time bidding. Wait a second. So originally,
reasons to believe. So
okay.
that's remember, I don't come from. So it's interesting. Stacy comes from the trade desk. I come from more of a kind of like a storytelling, more of a kind of like a creative point of view, connecting with we both connect with consumers, but we do it on both sides of the aisle.
For sure. So, but what was his symptom that made him need treatment?
It is he was just kind of like lethargic. I can't remember the exact. I don't want to this is where it gets really weird, because I'm in California and I've been so trained. I don't want to actually say what his thing was, because it was actually his private medical. I don't want to actually I want to be 100% precise. It's somewhere on a website. I don't have that memorized.
Fair enough. So okay, so in North America, what does distribution look like these days?
So we first started off working with a very local kind of retailer. If anyone knows, one of the best kind of like high-end kind of like health food markets is Erewhon. I'm not sure if many people know like the Halle Berry smoothie. We actually started the smoothies with them. We're both in the tonic bar, so with the plant protein of choice at Erewhon. But then we also have great velocity on sales. Can't go into too much details, but we're pretty awesome, and we love Erewhon. That's how we launched. And then we also have a DTC model, and then we've been picking up really awesome velocity with clinical nutritionists and other kind of things as well. So hopefully that answers everything. And then we have some other things I can't talk about that I'm really super excited about and really tired, but we'll get there eventually.
So, I mean, I have so many questions, and I keep wanting to make sure that I check myself and make sure they're catered to the audience, because I want to ask you, what made you transition from advisor to full-time employee, and how has that journey been? And I'll stop there.
All right, let's do that. I'm a massive believer. So if I didn't have this background on, you could see a road bike. I'm training for a charity bike ride with my bike friends called the Fireflies, which is a media and advertising group centered, and
Nice.
we raise money for City of Hope. We do. They actually ride into the Cannes Advertising Media Festival every year. That's been going on for the last 21 years. We also do a California ride. So I'm training for that ride. So I've always been very interested in endurance and athletic nutrition. So if anyone has ever done an Ironman, I've never done it because I'm a terrible swimmer. I like kind of sick like rock. Maybe I can do my Sean Connery impression. The name like the rock. Of course, you need to think you can swim. The nothing. I basically cannot swim that well. But if I was, I would actually do the Ironman. So they say that nutrition for endurance athletes is the fourth sport, and really understanding how you can power your body is something that I've been doing. I tend to ride like 5,000 to 7,000 miles a year on my bike.
Wow.
Do like crazy big rides. 110 miles was my biggest last year from LA to Ojai and back in 100-degree weather. So pushing myself and my friends, and we do this for anybody, and we train them up, and we show that the human body is really incredible if you have the right training, but you also have to have the right nutrition. So this is something I'm really passionate about, is like how the food that fuels you, that allows you to perform, is something really, really important to me. Whether it's actually organic, regenerative organic, any kind of like whole foods. When I grew up with my parents, we always had an allotment. So my parents, because they didn't have a lot of money, they were always growing their own food. So I've always been deeply connected to that kind of like that food culture. But I have in the past, I have worked for Unilever and Nestle and some of the big conglomerates.
I was
on
wondering,
yeah,
because let's assume you didn't say any brand names. There are brands that don't have the same natural ingredients that you're talking about. And
yeah.
as someone, I see you, and obviously this is our second time meeting, but I see you as someone who is like completely authentic and has to be tied to a mission or a
Oh,
purpose.
100%. Yeah, anyone who wants to sell, and that's all that really marketers are, with salespeople, you have to believe in what you're selling. And yes, there's a certain amount of like, you can trick yourself, like, because you can't always pretend to know everything. But you have to find the truth. When I was working at McCann Erickson, they have probably one of the best catchphrases in all of advertising, which is like truth well told. It actually goes back to like 1905, where they were actually doing a lot of like fruit advertising for all of the orchards around San Francisco, like old school Silicon Valley, before it was Silicon Valley, the orange groves and stuff like that. So it's finding the truth in the product and connecting authentically with an audience is so important to me, and I think it's so important to any marketer who's trying to do stuff. Find the truth, find a way to tell it in a unique and authoritative manner.
As a early stage company, how do you do that without the crazy budgets for research, et cetera?
I think it's even more important as you're smaller, is to find authentic ways to connect. So I love the fact that you picked up on. Hopefully, I'm always authentic, and I know that you can never always be truly authentic, because I can't always bring my authentic self to work. Because I try to, but I also sometimes have to filter because I am English, and English and California sensibilities don't always mix. I think you, as a smaller company, you have to make the moments matter. So it's something my CEO, Tara, used to be my client twice. So I'm so lucky to work under one of the best marketers that I've ever had in my career, to become like a true mentor as I transition from much more of a creative focus, but then kind of like branch out and try and understand a little bit more of the marketing kind of landscape. So I've always worked in integrated agencies with media, with data scientists, with like great 3D people, great developers, all those kind of things over the last 20 or so years. Being able to actually have those what if questions is really important. Being able to and answer those kind of questions together, but being able to expand that that tool set, but then actually put it in that beautiful constraint of like a smaller budget, smaller footprint, less brand awareness. It's an interesting new challenge to me. So I come back to that earlier question that you just asked, Stacy, like why come on board now? For me, it's
Right.
about growth, personal growth, but it's also a challenge. If you have a product that you actually believe in, and if I can just somehow make a dent and get people to accept plant protein as an alternative fuel source for themselves or a different food, that might actually help kind of the global warming stuff. So, Stacey, we haven't
I
talked
think,
about this.
yeah, I think you're so lucky because you're
Yeah.
so tied to a purpose that you believe in. It's like oozing out of you. And I don't think you could or would have made, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not like, we don't go way back, but like, if I know you, you would not have gone to an organization where it did not bleed out of you with
Yeah, there's some of
purpose.
that. I think it's easier. It's easier to be mission aligned. So I come back to my cycling group. So on the 10-year anniversary in 2017, I was nominated within the group to actually lead it that year. And there was like
Nice.
55 versus 10-year anniversary. And after that, after leading it and basically doing a full-time job in my part-time, pre-kids, or I had just one little baby at that point in time, the eldest, there was I felt like I was in a hangover for a whole year, and I was working for another brand I believed in, Lexus and like Toyota. Toyota and Lexus do the right thing. They give away their patents. And again, here you can hear me like trying to figure out a way to pass out both my personal beliefs and then my business beliefs. And they do. They're still a big conglomerate, and the people who work there really believe in what they're doing. And if you get to that scale, there's always going to be compromises in a corporate vision and a corporate strategy. But you can also, if you know enough about Toyota, they released they licensed their hybrid technology to everybody, including Tesla. There's a thing called Thumbs, which is a digital model for crash testing that they basically open sourced all that data to the car industry. They helped on airbag deployment. So they, as a company, they actually do think about things in a larger mission, because I think that's more important. And also, having worked on Lexus, having worked with some amazing qual and quant people, and all of the data that said affluent consumers and premium consumers are looking for more purpose-driven brands, I also had that quantitative data to allow me to say, I knew that this was going to be a success, and I could put my shoulder to the wheel or to the back of this vehicle and push it along, and therefore help make the world a better place. I know we just heard that from AMBev and stuff like that, but in a smaller brand, you probably have a little bit more of a chance to kind of make a bigger impact. And having spent the last, 20 years of my career being in gun to hire, I feel very lucky to have the opportunity to truly align my personal purpose with my corporate and career purpose.
Yeah, that's what everyone hopes for.
Yeah,
So
I'm very lucky. And I didn't move. I spent 12 years in my last agency, and I didn't move for anything. I moved for the right opportunity.
that's really cool. So did you see it coming when you went from advisor to full-time employee?
But we've been talking for a while.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of affluent consumers, that is your target audience, right? Like this is a premium brand.
Yes,
Correct?
it is. Well, it starts off as premium. So it starts off on a part of our corporate strategy, which I'll just touch on in broad brushstrokes, because I think anyone who's smart enough will notice that we started off in California. We are moving into New York. We're moving into geographical cities that actually have that kind of that population. We call them, our audience is called HVPs, high velocity performers. So people who are very mindful of what they eat and how they eat it, and might be a little bit more educated onto whole foods, definitely regenerative agriculture, moving from much more of a kind of a trendier thing and kind of branching out. It's easier to go trendy out than to go mass trendy or fashionable. So it's kind of like, it's that classic kind of Aikido approach. Take the opportunity that you have and use that as part of your corporate strategy. I did tell you my CEO was probably one of the best marketeers I've ever worked for in the 25 years. It's all of her architecture. She's brilliant. It's just a masterful approach and a great go-to-market strategy.
That's amazing. So what I wanted to ask you, so what is the strategy? But so your role spans across all of marketing, innovation, media, creative, etc., right?
Yeah, and we're doing a lot of it in house. So we're trying to build up an in house group that obviously can work on DTC. It makes a lot of sense to have the ability. Yeah, again, you'll see echoes of my career in what we're doing. It's easier to ask those what if questions if you have the opportunity to get those answers from great people who are virtually sitting next to you. We're a fully remote organization. We're pretty small, very small actually. We're punching above our weight. It's kind of crazy when you know how small we are to the impact we're making within the new brand place, and how we're going up against in the doors that we're open, how we're going up against and beating established brands. That's also a great call to arm. Like the LFG, let's fucking go, is a everyday the Slack. We're always doing that. Sean Connery is my new favorite. Ignore his personal things, just enjoy Sean and the James Bond kind of like spirit.
I told you, you're in the best part, like the ride up when you're building, and in my opinion, every win, whether it's big or small, the whole organization parties together because it's never been done before.
It's fun.
It's so
much fun. It is so much fun. And I have been advising a Web3 startup that was doing on the intersection between entertainment and technology, and that was really fun as well, but in a different way. But this feels so much more purposeful, and it's so much more mission aligned to that. Ultimately, how do I want to leave the world for my kids? I was a late dad, like 40, stuff like that. It's very top of mind. It makes kind of sense. Sorry, Stacy, I will ramble. You know this already.
Oh, it's so good. I have so many questions for you.
Let's go.
Okay, what was the most garbage advice you've ever been given that you want to repeat it because no one should ever follow it, and it's something that you hear all the time?
I have no idea. I think that is a ridiculously great question, by the way. I'm going to definitely ask that one.
No, I stole it actually from Brene
That's good.
Brown.
Genius Steals. Yeah, that's a great one, by the way. Genius Steals is a great piece of advice, but how do you know if it's genius? So that would be my... I'm all about using other people's ideas and refreshing them. We talked about like that idea of like creative, that kind of like both familiar and yet different. That idea of like how do you create cultural dissidence, or like that kind of that disco. There's a thing I learned a long time in art college, which was about color theory. Like if you know complementary colors in orange and blue, different side of the color wheel, red and green, purple and yellow. But if you actually mix down those colors into something, it creates discord. So I thought I had a book near me. Nick Hornby also talked about like, why do songs stick in your mind? And he was saying that there's a reason that songs stick in your mind, or those little kind of like earworm. I think Americans call it earworms. Those kind of that like kind of when you get like a little riff or there's a chorus that sticks in your mind.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
An earworm, I think it's called, like that kind of like that little lick, or that kind of you keep on repeating it. It's because your brain is trying to figure out, it's very familiar to something, but it's different. So it keeps on repeating in your brain again and again. And there's a reason why things like Got Milk, which was done by Goodby Silverstein and Partners, is so iconic, because that catchphrase is obviously, it takes the rules of grammar, but then it changes it, but then becomes something that's a little bit different. So you asked about, I've gone completely off topic, but I find it always, I'll always do this.
I haven't even noticed. I'm totally engaged. Keep going.
But this idea of like finding little things that are both familiar and yet different, and then using that to your advantage. So you also asked me about how do you actually punch above your weight? Part of it's actually getting closer to the consumer and trying to understand how they think and how they might act. So,
and you are the consumer, so lucky for you, because
But I'm not allowed to talk about that. As a marketer, I have to think about science. As a creative, I have to kind of mind my own emotions and my own experiences, but then also marry it with like the data and the insights I get from my planners team. My wife is also a strategy director, so she used to be an account person. We met at Ogilvy in New York, but she also works for a large gaming company called Riot Games, and then advises some startups on the side, which they're all about. That whole idea of creating like using data to create insights is really fascinating to me, which is one of the reasons why I always loved working with people like on the trade discs, like hey, can we query the DSP and the DMP, because I want to know, are there any insights within that data which allows us to actually pick out something, some kernel that we can then create some discord and some like creative ideas, really attach, really create what's both familiar and unique, and then kind of work off of that. So as a growing brand, as a tiny brand punching above its weight right now, what we're trying to do is we're trying to disrupt the category and grow beyond the category, which is great because we have that product, which also has the perfect profile of both being one of the best, the best. I can't ever say that in advertising because it's a claim, of course, but it's the best plant protein I've ever used. It's even better than probably like a whey isolate without any of that junk. It doesn't have those fillers. It doesn't have anything. It's just one pure ingredient. But then it creates that ability to kind of perform on a high level, which is what we're trying to do with the brand as well. Take our natural ability and then punch above our weight. You can tell.
Well, speaking of data, passion point for me is sales data. And let me just contextualize this for a second without giving a crisp commercial. The sales data is, to me, this data set that's sitting at CPG organization that's not being used in marketing, unless it's a smaller brand. It feels like the bigger the organization, the less likely that POS, inventory level data, et cetera, is being utilized to say, okay, let's only target consumers where there's actually inventory available. I'm curious if you use that data set at all, and if not, maybe because it's more D2C. Just curious where you guys stand on that.
Right now, we have a very clear picture of all inventory levels within our larger retailers. As we expand, it's going to depend on their technical maturity. As you know, I'm in your world, by the way, and I'm skating on very thin ice. I barely know this, by the way. But as you know, like different levels of technology maturity, and I think we can talk about that across all organizations. They're always going to be in different levels of maturity. The ability for us to, as a small team, we're very connected to each other. I just came from an S&OP meeting, so I can tell you exactly how much is on Amazon right now. I can tell you exactly how much is in our warehouses, how much is in our self-fulfillment. The small team is great because we have that thing. As we scale, that becomes a little bit more difficult, I think.
Do you want to talk to your wife? I bet you that's your wife.
No, it's not. It's actually it's actually I had my friend, one of my cycling friends, invited us into a honey company. We have a certain percentage of Malibu honey, which is a health food honey.
I was actually thinking, when you were talking, I was thinking about partnerships. How do partnerships with other brands play a role with the growth of your company?
Oh, extremely important. Like, yeah, again, being a purpose-driven brand, a B corporation, and definitely a women-led, Latinx founded, we are in that sweet spot of how anybody wants to work with us. I'm definitely open to that. So the larger brands who have something, having done, by the way, this is by someone who's also made a Sriracha car. So I once made a Sriracha themed Lexus IS with literally the world's smallest automotive budget that beat out Nissan and their Rogue One Star Wars massive budget at the LA Auto Show.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, no, we didn't beat them, but we were very parity. But the Toyota guys were actually launching one of their major models that year, and they put literally millions of dollars behind. And I remember getting an email from our Lexus PR people going, "You have no idea how happy this makes me because we completely beat them." Because we literally, one of my account people who I absolutely adore, Joel Dons, shout out to him, he's not going to be on here, but He
You
literally
never know.
doorstepped. He never know. He doorstepped with another person, Trina. They actually went out to Arcadia to where they actually make sriracha, and they basically found David Tran, got inside the factory, and actually pitched him, and he was like, "Absolutely, I give away my brand partnership all the time because it makes sense for my brand." So that's kind of it's a very powerful lesson in my mind. Is like the finding authentic brand partnerships are actually going to be important. As a brand marketer, knowing when to say no is equally as important as when to say yes. I want to make sure I actually answered your question because, yeah, again, as you know, I can meander. Part of the journey is the
No, I'm
fun.
thinking about what you're saying because it could be tempting to take a big partnership that might be sexy or well known, but if it's not authentic, then what's the point? You're sacrificing everything you've been working towards.
Absolutely. And my two friends, Chochi 1 and Chochi 2, they would not talk to me. So, like, I always need to keep these llamas kind of very much kind of in, like, one's going, do it, the other one's going, no, don't do it. So, I think part of it is actually just making sure we're doing it for the right reasons. We're always looking to scale, punch above our weight, so it makes sense to look for great brand partnerships that are slightly larger. There's so many different ways to think about and assess those brand partnerships, whether it's actual they're treating them as a media platform and looking at them from a kind of a reach and frequency. Obviously, that one is great. Then there's the storytelling aspect. There's that kind of fit and finish. And then there's going to be like a how does it impact on the audience, and does it make the audience think about you in a different way, and what is the outcome? And that comes down to tone. And I think my experience of working as a creative and that there's a strategy side to it, but then there's the executional side, and those two things have to be very much aligned. And you have to keep in mind that strategy as you work through the work and how it actually manifests in the real world and how it manifests in those long scrolling like things. And for a long time in my career, we've always talked about the last 5 years, we always talked about like the thumb stopping moments. How do you get people?
Oh,
How can you immediately connect with someone and go, I want to know more about that? That's kind of like PR thinking, that how do you intercept someone while they're trying to do something else, which is probably, I'm sure there's people from Instagram and TikTok and that's what they do for a living, but you can also do that with ideas. So the strength and power of ideas is so fucking important to me. It's so
while
important to
threading
anyone.
the needle to not give them a poor user experience, because we were talking earlier about how even a banner ad should be authentic and you should be empathetic to, if I'm reading the news, I don't want something that's distracting me. So I go, wait,
Yeah.
what was I reading? So it's so obvious that empathy is a core pillar of who you are in the work that you do. How do you bring that to packaging, messaging, like packaging?
Yeah, I think, well, funny enough, we just did. I had these down and I'm glad I did. I'm going to try and keep them really low. We have three new like packaging things. We actually have a 10 serve right here that we redesigned. We made sure that we put the image, every the images that we actually have on these packagings have a story. And there's a little thing on our blog post which actually talks about where they were where they were from, when they were taken, what was the thinking behind that. Trying to create narrative touch points for the consumer who wants to go deeper, but at the same time being respectful for them when they're in the aisle. So we had I will show you kind of even the packaging evolution that we've done. So the single serve, and we had like a little bit, this is me being a little bit, or this is me and the creative team going, hey, just 5 ingredients here. But then we realized as we were talking to the retailers that the new packaging,
One ingredient.
it just says just one ingredient. So it's way bigger and bolder, which is what our research and talking to the buyers and the retailers, they were like, oh my God, you should totally make that larger. So we've kept that. We've also got the circle motif, which represents the regenerative agriculture, which is obviously that circular idea of like truly being good for the planet, and that kind of wholesome circles become like a really important part of our brand and visual narrative. I like it when you can actually layer ideas from a communication point, and actually everything should have a purpose. And this is what excites me so greatly, is like as I've taken this role in house, the ability to layer stories and narrative. It's not important that you have to get it the first that first moment that you actually interact with a brand, But as you go deeper, we actually reward the customer for taking that moment to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's kind of like embedded long form storytelling just in packaging.
Oh, how do
And again, I could be completely like making this shit up,
it's
but I
working though.
honestly,
I'm ready to buy it. Like, what do you mean reward them?
I'd
Like
reward them for a
giving more
journey. So reward them on the
information?
journey as they take a journey with the brand and they discover it and they understand all the different levels of information that's behind there. Be respectful when you're at shelf. Try and communicate that, hey, I'm a great, wholesome, single source, one ingredient product that maybe comes from somewhere different, that has great shelf presence, that is in a recyclable or made of recyclable ingredients and stuff like that. But then surprise and delight them. I hadn't shown you this, and yet again, this will be a on the bottom. We did like a little kind of cool kind of. It's inspired by Andean kind of stuff, and just even showing that to buyers, like you pick it off the shelf and you go, "Oh, that's cool." Originally, we had it like wrap up on the bottom, so there was just a little bit. And then everyone was like, well, it looks like you've misprinted it, and that might actually not work for you. And I'm like, well, let's recalibrate. Let's put it all the way into the gusset. And yeah, again, this is like that kind of like layers of storytelling. Does that make sense, Stacy?
It does. And it's making me wonder, this might be a hard question or one you don't like, but in this journey, it's only been 5 weeks, but you've been a part of it a lot longer.
Yeah.
Is there anything any misstep you took that you really regret? Like what is a mistake that you've made that you've learned from that you wouldn't have done again?
I think anything is about not having enough information. So being mindful, anyone who's listened to this, if you can make more mindful choices, and I think you can never know what you don't know. And I think I would rather have asked better questions. But yet again, until you actually know the right questions to ask, sometimes you can't unlock the right information. So there's that idiom, which is hindsight is a beautiful vision, but one that's very hard to pull off. So
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a great idiom. I wish I'd known the right questions to ask. And I still wish that. And I still wish I could get a crystal ball and know exactly the right information. Having done very expensive TV ads, anyone who's ever sat in a video village and you watch take after take, and you're only going to ever use one of those takes, but that clock is ticking and you're spending all that production money, and you go, I wish I knew the exact 3 seconds of this clip we were going to use in the editing bay, and you don't know that. So sometimes you just have to go with what you don't know, make the best decisions, especially as a small company. Using your intuition and experience to kind of make those decisions, move, fail fast, learn, pick up, repeat. Don't make those same mistakes again.
Okay, I won't.
No, I'm going to make the mistakes. By the way,
I know.
being mistakes is human. Making mistakes is authentic. So it's like.
Okay, one of the last questions, and by the way, I didn't even look at my questions. So the ones I sent you, I didn't ask you any of them hardly.
I have them over here on my other monitor. You're doing a great job, Stacy, by the way. I love this.
Thank you. I could talk to you for a very long time.
I didn't
get into your investment story. There's so many. You're very.
That's about me. Let's talk about the brand that I'm in love with.
Oh, okay. How do you measure your success for the next year as a marketer there? It's hard to attribute. Everyone's a team, and it's like everyone's pulling their weight. But how at the end of the year?
I will come down to I was very lucky to have started off my advertising career in David Ogilvy, a sales guy, someone who'd had 9 different jobs before he ended up in marketing, and his whole thing was you sell or else. So ultimately, it's going to come down to brand growth, retail velocity, units shipped, and how much people love or unlove the brand. So standard metrics, branded, unaided, aided awareness, looking for proxies, all those kind of things, not spending too much money, not burning our investors' money, treating the money correctly, all the things that we should do as a senior executive in a small company. And then I would just say, like, fans. I think there's a massive opportunity with fandom, that ability for people to discover, to take co-ownership of brands is something that's really interesting.
Ooh, that is really interesting.
And then if we extend that out and think about how we touch the earth lighter, is another thing that I think is actually a measurement of the success of the brand. Like, how can we be a truly ethical brand? How can we do the right thing for the consumer?
Okay, final question, because I know we're at time. What would you tell your former self who was debating going to a smaller company, a purpose-driven company, but there's a risk because, of course, an early stage company is scarier to go to than a big company that you know you can predict the future of more.
Do it.
Do
Do
it.
it. Do it.
All right.
As my 4-year-old says, do it. Usually, as my son is about to jump off of something, she's like, just do it.
Thank you for your time, and I hope we can stay friends. I think you're
Totally. We're super connected. Stacy, I want to hear all about Crisp. You never got a chance. I know that that's part of the stuff I'm very interested in, as you were alluding. How do I get better data, get better insights? I always say I'd love to go from I think to I know. That is really important to me.
Let's do it. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you both so much. And I love I think to I know. That's really great. You guys have been an absolute blast. I'm glad I didn't have to have my hand on the beeper button because y'all kept going and I love it.
Oh, I can swear for days. I've actually been very low today.
Mother.
Stacy, thank you. Carrie, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening
Thank
to me
you.
dribble on for a while. Bye-bye.
Bye.